Bush's early warning: he could not stop. The report crossed his desk quietly. No alarms, no headlines, just words waiting to be believed. And once seen, they could not be unseen. To understand George W. Bush's presidency, we must begin before the attacks, before the speeches, before the wars. We must return to a warning that arrived early enough to matter, but too early to command action. Because leadership is not only judged by response, but by whether a moment is recognized as decisive while it still feels ordinary. Bush entered office focused on domestic priorities, education reform, tax policy, a belief that major threats belonged to the past. The Cold War was over. America stood unrivaled. History, it seemed, had slowed down. That assumption shaped how information was received. Then the briefings changed tone. Intelligence reports pointed toward a growing danger. Networks, intent, a pattern forming beneath the surface. The language was cautious, fragmented, uncertain. It did not demand urgency. It suggested possibility. And possibility is easy to postpone. Bush read the warnings. He asked questions. He absorbed the implications. But the system around him was not built for clarity in advance. Agencies worked in compartments. Signals lacked convergence. No single report carried enough weight to force action that would disrupt normalcy. The presidency at that moment was caught between worlds. Too early for certainty, too late for ignorance. Bush stood at the edge of awareness, sensing threat without shape. He did not yet know what would happen, but he knew something was moving. This was the beginning of his defining conflict. Not failure of intent, but failure of timing. A warning that could not yet outrun skepticism. A danger that felt abstract until it was no longer. Leadership depends on acting before clarity arrives. But acting too early risks credibility. Bush felt that tension without fully grasping its cost. The warning was there, the moment was passing, and history was already accelerating. As weeks passed, the warning faded into routine. Urgency dissolved into background noise. Briefings continued, but none delivered certainty. Intelligence spoke in probabilities, not conclusions. Threats were real, but vague. Plans existed, but lacked targets. Bush faced a dilemma leaders rarely discuss openly. Acting forcefully without clarity risked political overreach. Waiting for clarity risked catastrophe. The machinery of government moved slowly. Agencies guarded information. Jurisdictions overlapped. No single authority could compel coordination at speed. Bush relied on systems designed for response, not prevention. The presidency could sense danger, but it could not yet point to it. Daily governance resumed. Meetings shifted back to budgets and legislation. The warning remained, but it no longer dominated attention, not because it was ignored, but because it lacked friction. Without an event, urgency struggled to survive. This was the quiet conflict deepening. Bush understood that something was wrong, but not how wrong or how soon. Leadership demanded judgment in the absence of proof. Yet judgment without proof invited accusation if nothing happened. The presidency balanced caution against disruption. Inside Bush, concern hardened into unease. He asked whether more could be done. Advisors offered incremental steps. Discussions remained abstract. No one could say when, where, or how. The warning could not yet command the kind of action history later demanded. Then time ran out. The threat did not announce itself again. It arrived fully formed. No gradual escalation. No final briefing. Only impact. Only shock. Only consequence. The warning Bush could not stop was no longer a possibility. It had become an event, and the presidency would never return to its earlier assumptions. The moment after the impact erased every remaining illusion. Possibility hardened into permanence. In the hours that followed, the presidency transformed instantly. Uncertainty vanished, replaced by clarity that arrived too late to prevent damage. The warning that once felt abstract now defined everything. Bush no longer governed a stable nation. He governed a wounded one. The conflict shifted from anticipation to response. Information flooded in faster than it could be processed. Decisions were demanded immediately. There was no time for debate, only direction. Bush understood that hesitation now would deepen fear. Action even imperfect, became necessary to restore control. Inside him, the realization cut sharply. The earlier warning replayed in his mind, stripped of ambiguity. What once felt premature now felt prophetic, but regret could not be indulged. The presidency does not allow reflection during crisis. It demands forward motion. Bush addressed the nation, projecting resolve. Strength became language. Certainty became armor. The country needed reassurance more than explanation. Yet privately, the conflict deepened. The line between prevention and reaction had been crossed. The opportunity to stop what was coming was gone forever. As plans formed, urgency overpowered nuance. Threats were now assumed to be imminent. Ambiguity became intolerable. The logic of preemption took hold. Better to act too early than too late. The presidency recalibrated around fear of repetition. This was the emotional peak of Bush's story. Not anger, not vengeance, but the burden of knowing that warning without clarity is the cruelest kind. Enough to haunt, never enough to halt. The presidency now carried a singular mandate. Never let this happen again, whatever the cost. And in that mandate, the earlier warning found its final, irreversible meaning. The resolution did not arrive with peace. It arrived with permanence. Bush carried the warning with him for the rest of his presidency, not as an excuse, but as a weight. Every decision after was shaped by the memory of what had not been stopped. Prevention became doctrine. Risk tolerance vanished. Action replaced hesitation as the default response. This was the true climax of his presidency. Not the initial response, but the long shadow it cast. Policies hardened. Surveillance expanded. War became preemptive rather than reactive. The presidency reshaped itself around the fear of missing the next signal. Bush believed history would judge him not by what he intended, but by whether another catastrophe occurred on his watch. That belief justified extraordinary measures. Some strengthened security, others strained liberty. All were rooted in the same lesson. Warnings must never again be allowed to feel abstract. The cost was complex. Safety increased in some areas, trust eroded in others. The presidency gained tools it would never fully surrender. Power expanded under the banner of prevention, leaving future leaders to manage what had been normalized. Bush's story matters because it captures a cruel timing of leadership. Sometimes warnings arrive early enough to be seen, but too early to be believed. And once belief arrives, the moment to prevent has already passed. He could not stop what he saw coming. He could only ensure it would never be ignored again. That choice reshaped the presidency, and it still defines how leaders respond to unseen threats. Bush